Defense dominates in the final scrimmage before spring break. Let's break it all down here on Ragin Rundown. What's good, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome into another episode here on Ragin Rundown, the show where you will know all things UL sports. I'm your guy, Jamarcus Fitzpatrick, but you can always call me Fitz. And in today's episode, we are talking spring football. I don't believe that we've had one that we've been able to talk about. I know we mentioned some roster layout stuff once the transfer portal and the signing classes were all in, but they are 8 practices in, and we've had a lot of chances to see them in individual periods. But head coach Michael Desimo was so gracious enough to allow us to watch during their scrimmage, no cameras. So I have a notebook full, a couple pages actually. And so what I'll do is I'll tell you some of the key plays that I saw, who stood out. We'll break down things offensively first, defensively, and then kind of wrap things up with a little bit of special teams. They didn't do much special teams wise, but there were some moments in there, field goals made, deep punts, who lined up where, and all those things like that. So obviously, we've talked about how this team is extremely young. They have pieces that are returning, but a lot of them don't have very much experience in terms of snaps played. Like they've gotten into the game, but they were sitting behind guys like a Jordan Lawson, like a Cam Whitfield. The list goes on of guys that have been sitting behind them, and now this is their opportunity to step up and be the guys that are starting things off. So it took me a while, but I was able to figure out who were the ones that ran out on the field. I wasn't able to get the twos and the threes because these guys are wearing their practice jerseys. They got them rolled up on the side. So I can't see the back of the number. I can't see the front of the number, and I'm far away. All those things like that, it makes it hard to try to figure it out. But as I went through the full 2.5 hour practice that I was sitting there, I was able to pick up who were the ones. So and I'm going to be looking down at the notes and then looking at the roster as well. So offensively, from left to right, your left tackle was Zay Alexander. And obviously, too, I'll preface by saying that this is not going to be anything penciled in. Like, these are not set in stone starters. This is just giving a little bit of insight of what they were doing, because they also had a lot of guys that rotated in different positions, played different positions with different teams. Ones went in, they put a different guy at DB, they did a different guy at inside linebacker, all those things like that. Offensively, from left to right, your starting left tackle was Zay Alexander, number 57. Your left guard at one point was Caden Morrow, but then also Jacoby Isom. Like I mentioned, guys would rotate in. Jacoby Isom popped in and out at left guard as well. At center, it was Andrew Martinez, who is filling in for Cooper Fordham, who has been out all of spring and will be out with injury, but he will be back. So he'll be your one center. Andrew Martinez will likely be the backup. Caden Morrow also went in at one point at center to get reps so he can be polished as well for emergencies. At left guard, you had Matthew Broussard. You also saw Michael Bowens Jr. go in at left guard, or right guard, excuse me, at one point. And then in right tackle, it was the transfer from Tulane, Jace Mitchell, lining up for you, a guy that's a redshirt sophomore, transferred in from Tulane, and has been a guy that Coach Des has talked about as someone that can be really, really good for them. Obviously, quarterback, you had Lunch Winfield, and running back, Darrell Smith was the first back that was out wearing the number 0. They also rotated in Stephen Blanco, um, J.J. Gardner, and all those different players like that, but he was the first running back out. Receivers, Sheldon Sampson to the right, Trenton Chaney in the slot, and Landon Strother to the left. And then obviously Caden Jensen, Brock Chappelle coming in anytime they get in 11, 12, 13 personnel, all those different things like that. So those are the guys that you had offensively. Defensively, your defensive line, and this group was pretty consistent outside of the jack position. The jack position is that outside linebacker. The Cajuns are based out of a 4-3 defense, but they also get into a 4-2-5 where they'll take out one of the outside linebackers, and they'll have the safety in there, the position that Marion Ilium plays. So your defensive line, your core D line guys were on the right side of the defense. So the left side of the defense, the offense is right, was Lance Williams at end, Fitzgerald West at defensive tackle. It was, let's see, number 41 is Chase Edwards. at the other defensive tackle, and then Tito Chikure, the transfer at that jack position, that outside linebacker. So he had his hand in the dirt, but he also has the ability to be able to drop. Your inside linebackers, Jake St. Andre was one of them. Number three, Micah Johnson, I believe, yes, was one of the other ones. You also had Ethan Veal, a redshirt sophomore from Zachary, was in there as well. And then also the transfer Princeton Malbrew, who we talked about before, could play inside and outside. There were moments that defensively he would bump inside, and when they would go 4-3, he might move to the outside, or when they would go 4-2, he would bump inside, and Micah Johnson or Ethan Veal would go off and they'd bring in a safety. So he has the ability to be very versatile. And I do believe that I saw him during their 7-on-7 period also stand there at the jack position. So you're talking about a guy that can be a huge depth piece for you, that you can be able to utilize him in the inside, on the outside, rushing the passer, just a huge piece for you um, defensively. At corner, obviously, Brent Gordon Jr. was one of them. Avery Demery was another. I believe I also saw uh, Jeremiah Moses get in there a few times, if I'm not mistaken, at the other corner. When they did go the 4-2-5 package, it was Maureen Ilium that went in there. And then your back end safeties were Colin Jacob and Cody Jackson there on the back end. So those were your ones, so to speak, that really were consistently were going in and out of the lineup. Like I said, they rotated different positions and went from there. So starting offensively, some of the major plays that happened throughout. One of them obviously comes out of the backfield. Like, this is the type of offense that we're going to see guys running the football, which is why they reloaded that running back room, that they were going to need to be able to do that. Um, One of the players mainly that really stood out was Darrell Smith. He has a lot of juice to him, and we see them utilize the running backs a lot, like quick passes out of the backfield where you get them in space and they can get a little bit loose and wiggle. Darrell Smith was absolutely money to be able to do that. So I'm not saying that he's going to be the first back out, but he is somebody that, hey, we need to throw a little quick flare out to the outside to get a 5 yard gain. He can do it. We need somebody that can run in between the tackles. He can do it. We need an outside zone run. He can do it. So he is a very complete back, but you also have other guys in the mix like an Anthony Reagan, a JJ Garner, and also Stephen Blanco as well. Um, he had several runs in there that I noted and I starred, and then I wrote on the paper that Darrell Smith has juice, because I think at one point they threw a flat route to him. He turned upfield and then he ran over whatever DB it was that was there on that sideline. So the kid's got some good juice on him. He has ability to play, and that's going to be huge for them. Another player that really stood out, Lunch was not live, so he had on a gray jersey, so he was not able to be here, but every other quarterback was live. Um, and we'll get to a moment of why that was something interesting, because the defense was able to touch the quarterbacks a little bit. But another player at the quarterback position that really stepped up was Coleman Carter. So, like I mentioned, when they ran the twos out, one drive it might be Daniel Beal, another drive it was Coleman Carter, another drive it might be Sam Altman, giving these guys different opportunities to work with different offensive line groups, different running backs, different receivers, all these things like that. Coleman Carter has some wiggle to him, man, as a quarterback. Like, there were a couple of QB draws and some scramble plays where he really got loose and was able to pick up good yardage. Obviously, Lunch is your now quarterback. That's why he has a gray jersey on. You don't want him getting touched. But to talk about a piece that you're going to have to build for something towards the future, obviously, this is probably the first time since Levi Lewis, maybe in like 2021, where you know that you have a set quarterback and you're focused more on preparing a backup in case something happens, because we want Lunch to be healthy, knock on wood, for the entire season. But historically, that is not something that's always happened. Um, so having a guy that can come in and can have some similar traits to what he does, or can give you an extra wrinkle here and there if you need somebody different that's in there, is huge. So they were some really good players that made moments in there as well. I also had a couple of runs where we saw a couple of passes, excuse me. Landon Strother got a couple of curl routes thrown to him, some quick hitches there on the outside. Just some quick drop back. Look, he's open. Throw it to him right there out to the outside. Darrell Smith, like I mentioned, had some first down runs. They also utilized some of the speed that they have at receiver, like a Trent Cheney that I mentioned, a Russell Babineau, putting them in motion and giving them a jet touch pass up the sideline. So that's a little bit of a wrinkle that they could be factoring in. So that was something good to see as well. For the offensive line, they had a lot of good directional push whenever they were zone blocking. So football 101 type of thing. Zone blocking is directional, like you're not blocking a man, you're blocking in a direction. And so when they were blocking zone right, they were getting really, really good push up the field. Blocking zone left, getting really good push up the field, not getting very much penetration to where the backs, once they're getting upfield, it's the linebackers getting to them after a 4 or 5 yard gain. So they were getting some good push for the backs in moments. Um, and then also, I believe it was JJ Garner that he had a big run popped off, I think like a 30-yard gain at one point on an outside zone run that they had. That was really nice to see. So, like I mentioned, you know, you have a so it was a outside zone that they gave him. He got a first down. They hurried up and he pops off a 30-yard run and attacks onto a face mask. So they end up down near the 1 yard line or something like that. And like I mentioned, the defense had some big moments throughout the day. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a quick timeout. And when we come back, we're going to highlight some of the major players that shined in this scrimmage defensively and what that's going to be able to do from a depth standpoint, meaning how it's not just going to be one player that you're relying on in this young group. It's going to be by committee of playmakers that you're going to have around the board. But let me take a quick break. When I come back, we'll talk defense. We come back here on Ragin' Rundown. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Raging Rundown. We're going to get back into the action in just a second, but do me a favor, please. If you're watching on YouTube, like this video, share it, leave a comment down below, and interact with me a little bit because I love talking with you guys. But most importantly, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you're listening, please follow the podcast feed, rate the show, and leave us a review because that's going to help us get in front of more Raging Cajun fans just like yourself. So in this scrimmage, like I mentioned in the show open, the defense had some really, really great moments. Um, Priest Ash was a part of the twos group that rotated in there at the defensive end spot. He had some big tackles in there for you. I know during their opening drive, he had a tackle for loss early on. Um, Also, Chase Edwards, who stands at a whopping 6'7", if I'm not mistaken, 6'7", 295 pounds. There was a moment that he got a rush upfield and he raised his hand up and he was able to get a knockdown. Like that's huge for a defensive lineman because a lot of times we look at stats and we're saying how many sacks is he getting, how many tackles for loss is he getting, but sometimes pressures and making it difficult for the quarterback getting knocked off his spot and balls batted down are just as impactful because now the quarterback is trying to throw the ball and he's thinking about, is this defensive lineman going to raise his hand? Is he going to knock it down whenever I get going up the field? So those were two guys that stood out on the defensive line. Um, we saw a lot of delayed blitzes throughout the scrimmage as well. At one point, going back to that drive where I talked about JJ Garner that popped off the 30-yard run that put them inside the 5 yard line. They're there on the goal line and should be the money down where you're supposed to punch it in and it should be easy. But the defense bowed their necks and they were able to get a stop. Tito Chikure was one of the players that had a tackle for loss there inside the red zone. And, I also want to preface this as I'm saying this. Like, I know many people may listen to this and will say, oh, so that means the offense is going to be bad again. Not necessarily. When you're practicing against guys over and over and over again, like you tend to pick up on things better. Like, generally, defense is going to be further ahead in practice than offense is because they're seeing how you're lining up. And even though they're saying that they're not cheating play, they know, hey, this formation, they're probably going to run inside zone right here. Hey, this formation, we might see this route concept. And so now they're playing more instinctually than usual and differently because they feel like they know this team a lot better. That's why they say practice is supposed to be harder because as an offensive player, if you know that this dude is saying like, hey, I know what you're running, it makes it a lot harder to be able to execute it. But then when you get to the game, that makes it a lot easier. So I do want to say that, but the defense did have some really really good moments in there. Another drive, we saw Prince Malbrew come up with a strip sack and a fumble recovery. Again, very huge because, like I talked about, him having the ability to go inside, outside, and also put his hand in the dirt and rush the passer like what he did back in high school. Um, we saw delayed blitzes, like I mentioned. At one point, Jeremiah Moses got an interception. I think Lunch was throwing like a out route or something towards the sideline, and he threw it, and Jeremiah was able to come up with the interception, turnover, which is something that you're going to need as well. So strip sack and a pick are part of this scrimmage happening there. Some young players also getting into the mix as well. Patrick Gosley had a tackle for loss, and he had a half sack that combined with AJ Spencer at one point when I think it was the twos or the threes. Hayden Darbon, a kid that is a local product from Eunice High School, had a sack in the mix as well. And I think also, if I'm not mistaken, Caleb Edwards. Yes, Caleb Edwards also had a sack as well. It was one where the quarterback was rolling out and was holding the ball for a minute, but he was able to finish the play and get a sack in that moment. So those were some of the big moments that happened defensively. Um, and it just seemed like in a lot of instances the offensive line was overwhelmed. Not that they just couldn't block the guys, but that the defensive players were just getting back there. They were coming up with the right pressures. They were lining it up and blitzing into gaps where things are open, where they can run free. In a lot of instances. And again, that does not mean that the offense is going to be bad, but it just means that the defense has ability to be able to make those plays. Now they have to be able to translate that into real life game action. Some other notes that I noticed a couple of times, I think during red zone, Brent Gordon moved inside more at the kind of star position, that safety position that Marion Iliam plays. And Iliam moved to the outside where Brent was. I don't know if that's like a goal line thing or if that was just something that they were trying to try out to say, like, hey, Brent, let's see if you can play in this type of position. Obviously, in high school, Brent Gordon was a dual kind of player that can play both sides of the ball. So there's no telling of how they're going to utilize him. He is one of your best defenders, being as young as he is, but he is one of your best players on the defensive side of the ball. There in the red zone, I think we had a one touchdown, two touchdowns, maybe. I think I remember seeing a Stephen Blanco touchdown run, and then a corner strike that Daniel Bill threw to Kadarius Wade. So those were some of the major plays that we saw throughout this scrimmage, offensively and defensively. And like I said, it was good to see these guys really get after it. You could tell that they were high energy, that they were really feeling the atmosphere, and that even though that they've been hitting against these guys for 7 other practices, plus this one making it 8, that they were still excited to just be playing football. And that's something that's really, really important. That's great as you're continuing to build chemistry. Coach Dez has said multiple times, in media availabilities of how this team is young and that a lot of these young guys, these freshmen, are getting opportunities to be in kind of a trial by fire type of instance where, hey man, like the bullets are flying. Are you going to go out and make a play? And that is going to help them tremendously in a lot of instances because when you really need somebody that's going to step up and guys are game planning for a Brent Gordon and saying like, hey, we're not going to throw to this side, can that other corner make a play? Or when guys look at a Fitzgerald West that's been an experienced player on the D line and say, hey, we're going to double him more. Chase Edwards, what can you do? Tito Shakire, what can you do? Lance Williams, what can you do? All of those things like that. Those are going to be the moments that these guys are going to have to step up and answer the call. And I think that as they continue to grow as a team, that they will be able to do that. One final note before we get out of here. Special teams wise, at punter, we saw Mason Golding punting the football quite a bit. Some of the guys that were catching on the punt return in was like Landon Strother, Russell Babineau, the Acadiana product, and then Brent Gordon Jr. as well. Special teams, another note, I think Tony Sterner made a pair of field goals, a 37 and a 38-yard field goal on the drives where you did punch it in. So that does give you the opportunity to know that maybe you can get some good consistency there from your field goal kicker. And Mason Golden, some of the punts that he was kicking against a rush So players were rushing him at the time, but he was pinning it back pretty deep. So as we continue to keep our eyes on that, obviously, guys, we're going to give you updates more and more every time as we go along. But it's still very early. They have 7 more practices, including the Vermilion and White game, where we will finally get a chance to see them, or you guys will finally get a chance to see them for the spring game that will be open there to the public. But anytime that there's a scrimmage, I will try my best to give you guys an update to tell you who stood out, who's making big plays, who's lining up in different positions and different things like that. So hopefully I can be able to drop another episode like this for you guys um, as we progress through the spring and then work our way to the summer and then work our way into the fall. And before you know it, football season is going to be here. In September will be right around the corner. So that's going to wrap up this episode here on Rage and Rundown. If you made it to this point in the video, thank you so much. Please do me a favor, like it, share it, leave a comment down below. But most importantly, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. If you're listening, please follow the podcast feed wherever you get your great podcasts, just like this one. And also follow the feed, rate us, all those good things like that, because that's going to help us get in front of more Raging Cajun fans just like yourself. I'm your guy, Jamarcus Fitzpatrick. We'll see you guys next time.